8:40 exactly, news and views on Salam Media. And in a statement on Tuesday, the presidency said that the recognition of South African Sign Language as the 12th official language is an important step towards the realization of the rights of persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. We will be talking with Liz-Anne Mohale, Provincial Director of Deaf South Africa, Gauteng, to unpack this further. And I'm hoping that as she responds, she'll be signing as well as speaking. A very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Julie, and the viewers and the listeners.
Are you not
Unfor-
going to be signing either?
Unfortunately, I do not have an interpreter with me, so
Okay.
I will be voicing the interview.
Oh, it's a
Um,
pity. I would love to have had
yes.
the interview interpreted in signed language as well, but perhaps next time. I guess the first and most important question to ask is what percentage of the population are we talking about here regarding sign language, and how important is it to be accommodating this percentage of people in the country?
Okay, so approximately, I would say, according to stats, but it is also not perfect. About 1.4 million citizens in South Africa are deaf, and about 600,000 uh, deaf people actually use South African Sign Language or as means of communication. So this would basically mean that South African Sign Language becoming the 12th official language is at the root of these deaf people using South African Sign Language freely, and also that it's at the root of their human rights because now it's all about accessibility. Wherever you'll be going, especially in government institutions, South African Sign Language will then need to be readily accessible.
More importantly, Lizanne, I think the question is how are uh, children who are hard of hearing born with a hearing impairment, how are they being accommodated in the school system, in the education system? Because that's where it starts, does it not? If they don't get the foundation phase right as far as those children are concerned, because they're at a disadvantage, they're going to go through life battling, possibly never being able to upskill themselves adequately and also find meaningful employ. So shouldn't it start there rather than? And yes, it's a step in the right direction, officializing, sign language. But I'm kind of wondering about the other important basics for people or children who are hard of hearing.
Yes. So basically, being born deaf means that South African Sign Language or Sign Language is your first language. It's your primary language and your primary means of communication. So this being offered in schools of the deaf, we do have special schools, and basically this is actually, as you said, a step in the right direction where it will now be or we are looking towards it being mandated that educators in the special schools are mandated to actually know South African Sign Language because that is where the language is being taught. And that's where, because you can't have a subject, um, for example, English or Afrikaans, and be for a deaf child, you cannot be teaching it verbally. So South African Sign Language will then have to be mandated that teachers in the schools of the deaf will need to then have a basis and a module or a qualification for teaching in South African Sign Language.
And that would then obviously assist the child or children in a great way. In fact, it would allow them to better understand the world around them, their subject matter at hand as well, and possibly be almost on par or on par with their regular hearing counterparts from regular schools. Would that be a correct assessment? Or are children with hearing impairments only exposed to specific subjects at the school level? Because that then is still
Mm.
disadvantaging them, is it not?
Yes, it is. Um, at the moment, South African Sign Language is a module within the school system, rather a subject, excuse me. It is a subject that is being taught in the school system. However, some of the schools don't always have all the subjects. So once again, because the material is not available, and it is actually a very unique environment to teach in, teaching in the schools of the deaf. It's a very unique environment. So the teachers and the educators that are found in the system actually needs to be well equipped so that they don't lose the content of curriculum that is being set out. So yes, the basically the schools, they need to be well equipped, and also yeah, this is actually um, a very
A huge challenge,
yes,
undoubtedly. And I
yes, it
get,
is.
Lizanne, I get the fact that bringing these schools up to speed is going to involve huge resources, because it means the teaching staff have to obviously learn the language. It does take a little time and resources, of course, to learn the language, and then to be able to teach it correctly or properly. So yes, it is a huge a challenge, and I guess in time we will get there. But let's look at the South African language. This is an indigenous language that constitutes an important element of South African linguistic and cultural heritage. It has its own distinct grammatical structures and lexicon, and it is independent of any other language. And I also then further need to state, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that any and every country that you go to in the world, their sign language differs from place to place. How difficult is it to adapt? So you have a person who is hard of hearing in South Africa, decides to migrate or work elsewhere or go on holiday, etc. Are they able to easily adapt to the sign language being used in a foreign country?
Yes, so you're very right, Julie, that the sign language do differ in dialect, and basically each, and this is born from the schools because each school has their own dialect, and but it doesn't mean that I cannot communicate with another person without using sign language for that matter. So yes, the dialects differ, but in each country, but there is also a universal sign language, and certain words basically in the grammar would differ, but I will be able to follow a conversation with another person from another country, being deaf. So yes, it is basically born from the different schools, but it is a unique language. It is different from English, it is different from spoken language, because it is a visual language, and it's also not derived from a spoken language. Sign language is sign language, and you cannot also, there isn't sign language in a different language. Sign language is sign language.
Okay, so let's understand what this means for our deaf community or our community that are hard of hearing. Let's go right back to the child that has just been born deaf, right up to older adults that have this disability. Is this groundbreaking? How's it going to change their lives?
Yes, of course it is groundbreaking. This, it's really, it's a proud moment for the deaf community. It's a happy moment. We are ecstatic to be receiving this good news, because the advocating and lobbying for South African Sign Language to become an official language dates back to 1994, where Deaf Federation of South Africa has been one of the forefront organizations advocating and lobbying for South African Sign Language to be the 12th official language. And this is basically so that every person's human rights can be enjoyed fully, basically. And yes, it it means that there's now going to be more accessibility. Yes, we're taking one day at a time, but I think this just gives us a better leg to stand on, because all these times it's been guided through policy and legislature, but the law being passed through actually just gives us a better leg to stand on. It means that we can now um, access and enjoy our full human rights, from being a child, getting a proper education, being a young adult, getting accessibility to jobs, employment, having the right to actually speak and negotiate with the employer that, there's something called reasonable accommodation, which can now come into play, as well as older persons, accessibility, for example, going to the police station, having an interpreter there, or having a staff of the police station being able to communicate using South African Sign Language and not spoken language. So this is groundbreaking. It is basically at the forefront of every deaf South African citizen enjoying their human right and also having accessibility.
Well, that is good news indeed. Undoubtedly, this sort of legislation is, I should imagine, in first world countries, they are possibly way ahead of us. But we are, like you say, taking a step in the right direction. And it is very, very, comforting to know that we are aware and we are doing as a country everything possible to assist people with disabilities of different types. And in this situation, obviously, we're talking the hearing disabled people. So thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning. Lovely to bring a good news story to our viewership. So thank you, Liz-Anne Mohale. Go well and God bless.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity for being with you on the show.
My pleasure entirely. It is 8:52 a.m. News and views on Salam Media, and in a minute or two, we'll be crossing over to India, and we will be talking with Advocate Kazi. He's a representative of the 800-year-old mosque, which the fascist BJP party or one of their members, an unregistered organization, have tried to overtake the mosque, close it down, ban Muslim people from using the mosque for their salah, for their 5 times salah, and also claiming that the mosque was built on an old Hindu temple site. So those were the ridiculous claims put forward by that unregistered party. We're going to hear from Advocate Kazi what was the ruling when they went to court with this matter. So please stay with us.